Ma'am, with your permission, can I begin the program?
Sure.
Good afternoon, everyone present here. Good afternoon, dear ma'am. It is with great pleasure I take a great pleasure and honor to invite our resource person here on behalf of KLE College of Law, Navi Mumbai, conducting the 7-day online program, online CBP on e-resources and legal research. Today we have with us the distinguished speaker, Dr. Devmita Mandal, for today's session on the topic of copyrights and licensing in digital context. Just a minute. Sorry, ma'am. Sorry for the disturbance. Dr. Mandal is currently serving as an assistant professor at Hidayatullah National Law University, Raipur. She teaches intellectual property law, specialization papers, and information technology laws to graduate and postgraduate students. She holds LLM with specialization in intellectual property rights from Nalsar University of Law, and her integrated BA LLB is from KIT Law School, Bhubaneswar. Her areas of interest are intellectual property laws, information technology laws, and changing facets of concept of law, technology, and justice in society. Dr. Mandal has been selected for WIPO full sponsorship in 2019 for participation in second IPIRA conference held at Fakultas Hukum Universitas, Indonesia, and was also awarded full scholarship for workshop on access to medicine, TRIPS, and patent in developing world, co-organized by TIS Mumbai, Third World Network, and Jan Swasthya. She has authored several impactful journal articles and book chapters on topics such as dynamic web blocking injunctions in digital world, IP disputes resolved via arbitration, and the protection of indigenous knowledge and cultural heritage. Beyond scholarship, Dr. Mandal is actively involved in IP awareness initiatives, delivering lectures across institutions, contributing to policy dialogue, and working with communities to enhance legal literacy around technology and creativity. We welcome you, ma'am, and we are deeply honored to have you on board with us. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. I'll share my PPT and then I'll start. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So you let me know if this PPT is visible.
Yes, ma'am, it's visible.
Okay. So for today's session, the topic which will be discussing is copyrights and licensing in digital context. Now, while copyright and licensing is a very wide topic, I'll be restricting it to legal research and legal e-resources only. Okay. Let's have a basic introduction first. When we talk about this session, the primary objective will be to understand how copyright law operates in digital era and how the licensing provisions of copyright are actually shaping access to and use of resources. These e-resources are primarily focused on use for research purpose, academics purpose, course of instruction, or even students in their answer or assignments thereby. So when we talk in with this objective, how copyright law is relevant, the context which becomes important is the explosion of digital content. In today's world, instead of visiting libraries, students are now visiting or research scholars are now visiting different platforms. Internet has facilitated access to these resources from across the globe. So we have academic databases, we have online libraries, we have e-learning platforms. All of these are facilitating access to resources per se. So we are not confined to whether our physical libraries anymore have resources. We can pull up resources beyond our institutions, beyond the scope of our country also, and and fetch resources through internet from various parts of the world. Thereby, this has facilitated research. This has promoted academic, collaborative, and interdisciplinary work per se. But with that, there has been increase in newer kind of challenges also. So, for example, with invention of internet and different digital tools, it has become easier to copy. it has become easier to remix content and to reshare the same through different platforms. In modern world, when we talk about in classes per se, or when we talk about research, some of the basic questions which arise is there is piracy of content, there is plagiarism of content, there is content being recirculated or remixed without permission thereby. Our agenda today for this lecture is to look into these issues. And with that agenda, we will focus on how to spread awareness on copyright compliance. So, we being a part of the legal fraternity, how do we respect copyright law, use digital licensing, and thereby promote research on based on ethics? This is with this introduction, I'll move on and start with today's session. Let's look into, because I don't know what is the background of today's participant. So let's first introduce to the concept of copyright. When we talk about copyright, copyright is nothing but an exclusive right. It is a kind of intellectual property right, and it is protected in India through the Copyright Act. We do not have any section under the Act which defines copyright, but the protection can be stressed back to two sections per se, that is Section 13 and Section 14 of the Copyright Act. And both of these sections, particularly Section 13, talks about what are the subject matters of copyright, and Section 14 talks about what are the exclusive rights in respect of individual subject matters per se. Thereby, we can say that copyright is a legal protection for matters like original. While we are talking about it, let's all also refer to one of the words and get motivated. When we do this, in what we do is we encourage the author to create more works. And we also ensure the limited period of protection ensures that are balancing between the two things. One, the exclusive right. Second, the public access to the particular work thereby. Because this is the
Excuse me,
purpose.
ma'am. Your voice is breaking.
Thereby, copyright law, including the Copyright Act in India, has certain protections within the Act itself. Yes? Can someone confirm? Okay. Can't hear properly. I see.
Ma'am, sorry to interrupt. There is a voice breaking from your end, maybe some internet issue.
Okay, some are saying that it is audible. I'm not sure.
Yes, ma'am. Your voice was breaking for so might be some internet
So I'll
issue.
start again. Yeah, maybe some internet issues per se. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So
Yes,
you
ma'am.
let me know whenever there is a issue. Okay.
Ma'am, the
Because
voice started breaking at around when you were introducing us to section 13 and 14 of the Copyrights Act.
okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So I'll again share the PPT. Let me know
Yes,
if
ma'am.
that issue comes again, then I'll
Yes,
perhaps
ma'am.
reconnect again. Okay. So yes. So section
Yes, ma'am.
13 talks about what are the subject matters, and section 14 says that in respect of individual subject matters, which are the rights which are there under the Copyright Act. And in the purpose, I was telling that the purpose of copyright law is to reward the people who are the creator of the work, while the other angle to it is that public has access to the knowledge also. So the limited period of copyright ensures that after the term of protection, the public continues to have access, free access without payment of any royalty to the particular knowledge. Now, thereby there is a balance between the exclusive right to the of the author or the owner of copyright and the public's right to access the copyrighted material. When we talk about the exclusive right, this right is particularly called as the economic rights under Section 14. So, some of the examples of economic rights can be what? Right of reproduction, right of communication to public, right of adaptation of the work. I have mentioned these three because these are more relevant for our discussion today when we talk about digital licensing of copyrighted work for e-resources. The other right which is there is the moral right, which is the right of authorship and the right of integrity. When I say authorship, that means that if I have written a particular article, I have the right to be cited or my name to be published whenever that article is published or is cited thereby. And right of integrity says that if I have stated a particular statement and that statement is being modified, altered, or made as such which is detrimental to my ideology, then it will be violating my right of integrity. So this is known in copyright language as authorship right and the moral right of integrity. Now, when we talk about the period of protection, depending on the nature of the work, it is the life of the author plus 60 years in India. And for some other works like cinematographic films, it is actually 60 years from the date of publication. When we talk about the legal basis, all of that concept which I've discussed till now, the introduction to copyright, is as per the Copyright Act 1957, which has been amended in 2012. This is a significant amendment which has happened in 2012. Of course, there are other amendments also, but this was the most significant one. Now, with this background, let's look into copyright in digital environment. When we talk about digital works for the purpose of research particularly, then we are talking about e-books, databases, online journals, websites, software, or multimedia. Now, any participant, if they have any question, please you can ask me in between also. I do not have a problem to clarify in between also because this is a long lecture. So I may be going through the concept and you may not follow in between. Now, when we talk about these works per se, digital works like books or articles or databases as in set of data per se, or any journal which has these articles, book reviews thereby, or websites which has information in the form of reports or data sets or published opinion as blogs, or even softwares like for example we use platforms like Manupatra, which is a software, and there are also applications of these companies which are softwares, or any other multimedia, like for example right now we are using Google Meet, so such kind of technologies which facilitate multimedias. All these are relevant for the discussion of copyright in digital environment. Now, what happens in digital environment is that duplication becomes very easy. To make a copy digitally is easier than to make a copy physically. When we talk about copying physically, if I give you a 50-page article and if you have to copy it, you have two technologies. Either you handwrite whole of the 50 pages or you go and photocopy it, something like that. But with digital age, what has happened that articles can be just CCP'd, as we say, copy, cut, copy, pasted. So duplication has become very easy. Similarly, transmission, internet has also facilitated transmission. Now I can share the same content through worldwide network with everyone with an instantaneous click by sending an email or sending an electronic message through WhatsApp or any other platforms thereby, or even sharing on platforms like, let's say, Facebook, YouTube, whatever. So this is one of the first issues. The second issue is cloud storage and file sharing. So sometimes what happens is that we store it in our drives or other cloud services and we give access to others. So for example, faculties give access to their students, research scholars, or universities give access to their faculties, research scholars. So this also, the storing itself needs a reproduction, and the transmission amounts to right of communication to public. So thereby a violation of the copyright thereby. The third question is regarding AI generated works. So currently faculties across or evaluators across the globe is struggling with projects, assignments, dissertations, thesis. All these are being written through AI technologies thereby. So when we talk about these AI generated work, does it amount to copyright infringement? And what is the connection with digital text mining per se? And lastly, we will look into some of the concepts like TPM, that is technological protection measures, including encryption, DRM, that is digital rights management, and access control. So if you are clear till now, we'll move forward. Ashna, I'm audible, right? Hello? Am I audible? Can someone confirm?
Yes, ma'am,
Yes,
you're
ma'am.
audible.
Okay. So now, when we talk about the technological protection measures, then that has come, that issue has been recognized not now, but that issue has been recognized in the beginning of the millennium century itself. So in 2000 itself, this issue was resolved by passing of the two international legislations, that is the WIPO Copyright Treaty of 1996 and WIPO Performers and Phonogram Treaty. In both of these treaties, WIPO, that is World Intellectual Property Organization, has talked about two terminologies. One is technological protection measures, that is TPM, and another is rights management information. When we talk about TPM, the WCT and the WPPT, which are popularly called as the Internet Treaties of WIPO, it says that the countries have to protect adequate protection and give legal remedies against circumvention of any effective technological measure. What does it mean? How is it relevant for our community? So, for example, let's say that there are platforms which I'm accessing, maybe a website from which I want to copy a paragraph for my assignment or there is scroll and read the information, you cannot download that particular PDF or the content per se. This is because that particular website owner or platform owner has implemented a technological protection measure which disables such kind of copying or disables such kind of downloading per se. Thereby, they're controlling how the content is accessed and how it is further transmitted. You cannot share it with someone else without the permission of the platform owner. This is called a TPM. Now, of course, there can be, when there is a technology, there is a counter technology also. So let's say if you are using a technology which helps in decrypting the protection technology and thereby allowing you to copy or download, then you are in violation of the TPM measure. Okay. Thereby, you are in violation of a legal remedy under copyright law. Similarly, the next concept which is relevant is rights management information. What is rights management information? So this is a paragraph I've taken from the WIPO Copyright Treaty and the Phonogram Treaty only. So it says that information which identifies the author or the performer or the work performance of the author or performer or the producer of the work or owner of any other right or any information about terms and conditions of uses and any numbers or codes that represent such information. So very simple. You will find out that even for physical books, for example, I have a book here, if you can see, there is this code which is there, right? All scannable codes. Now, this code or any content which you're accessing online having such code. So, for example, if you download an article from Jest or Manpatra, you'll find out there will be one line which will say that this article was downloaded from Jest or at this point of time, like one web that details or the codes which can be scanned and the information can be fetched about who is the author of this article or the book, or who is the performer of the content, or who produced it, who is the publishing house, Oxford University Press, something like that, who is under rights management information. So such numbers and codes cannot be tampered or manipulated with. If such numbers or codes which helps in fetching the rights management information digitally is tampered, then it amounts to again violation of a legal right. So I have discussed with you two particular access control mechanism. One, the technological protection measures, that is the TPM measures. Second, the rights management information, which in short is also known as RMI. Both of these were introduced by the WCT and the WPPT, which are known as the Internet Treaties of WIPO, and they have been inculcated within the Indian Copyright Act also. So I have mentioned here, you can all see that. One second. Section 65A talks about technological protection measures and makes it a punishable offense, removing such technological protection measures. Similarly, any kind of tampering with the rights management information is a punishable offense under Section 65B of the Copyright Act. Okay. Moving ahead. Now, when we talk about this digital works, digital contents, articles, are they protectable? And if they are protectable, are they protectable similar to a physical work or not? This is a question which may often come to your mind. Like, let's say if I do a painting offline, of course it is that painting is my work and thereby protectable. But what if I use paint option of my laptop and paint a drawing or a painting or a sketch or something like that? Will it be still protectable? That painting is a question which often comes to our mind. Now, in this, there is a Supreme Court judgment, that is Eastern Book Company versus DB Modak. This case is very relevant. So this case is of 2008. It says, it talks about the fact says that Eastern Book Company or EBC, we know is a publisher of work. Many of our textbooks, reference books are published by EBC, right? So EBC has a publication known as the SCC law reports or the Supreme Court cases law reports. Now, in this SCC, you will find out that edited versions of the Supreme Court judgments are printed. Okay. Now, how are they printed? You will find out each case has a head note which summarizes what this case is about. Is it a constitutional issue? Is it a property issue? Is it a criminal case? Then there will be paragraph numbering also and other kind of formatting. So if in the original case there was a spelling mistake, there was a typo error, all those will be formatted. And also in the EBC cases, you'll find out that, let's say, if it is a case where DB Basu case has been referred to. So on clicking, bringing the arrow to the case, you will be directed to the original case per se, right? So cross-referencing is also there. And any other kind of editorial inputs, like this case was upheld, reversed, referred to, all this is also there in the edited versions of the Supreme Court judgments as published in SCC per se. Now, EBC finds out what SCC does is that SCC online is available online, as well as it had its CDs and DVDs having these cases, reported cases, and they were selling it commercially. So they found out that DB Modak's company had copied and reproduced substantial portions of their copy edited Supreme Court judgments, and thereby they claim that it is a violation of their original literary works. Now, when this case happened, the other party, DB Modak and other defendants, they said that such court judgments are in public domain and thereby not protectable by copyright. So question was whether the edited and formatted versions as formatted by the copy editors of SCC, whether they are having any copyright on them, and thereby since they're published by the EBC, whether such content has any kind of protection thereby. Now the Supreme Court said that since the copy edited version as early that SCC is actually compiling the judgment here.
Devmita ma'am? Devmita ma'am, sorry for the interruption. Am I audible? Devmita ma'am?
Yes, you are audible. Am I
Sorry
audible?
for the interruption, ma'am, but your voice is your voice is scrambled, ma'am, and at moments your entire screen is also getting frozen. If you could connect to another internet source, there is
Okay, so
some issue.
oh, sure.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
Okay, hopefully that issue will not come. I'm connected to another Wi-Fi.
Yes, ma'am. Now
Yes,
it's
ma'am.
perfect.
You're audible now.
Okay. So yes, so the court said that India does not follow sweat of pro doctrine, but it follows the modicum of creativity. So thereby, when the copy editors of the EBC, they have added these paragraph numbers, editorial notes, they have edited, done formatting, it is actually protectable. Now, what is the relevance for digital era? This case is relevant today because with the rise of AI or digital publishing and e-resources, all the curated digital contents that are available. For example, the access to cases, the online libraries, the list of databases listing these cases according to perhaps the high courts or the district courts or the year of publication or subject matter like criminal case, civil case, in civil, what kind of civil matter. All these curated databases and the contents thereby are protectable. Similarly, this also clarifies that while raw public information available may not be copyrightable, but any kind of creative organization of the same or curation of the same is actually protectable. So, for example, if you access SCC online or if you access Manupatra and their cases, you'll find out that the software or the technologies or the search tools available there allows you to search by various methods. Like, do you want to search by the year of the case happening, or which are the cases which has overruled, which are the cases it has relied upon. Thereby, these curated contents are all copyrightable. And maybe the raw data, the judgment is not, but how the judgment has been copy edited, or how even for articles, if you look into any platform, let's say EBC's website itself, you want to look for books, you want to look for articles on a particular subject matter. So by author you can search, or by subject matter you can search, by year of publication you can search. These all constitute databases, and these databases are copyrightable. Now, thereby, one question which comes to our mind is what is digital rights management? When we talk about digital rights management, we are talking about not only managing of the copyright, but we are also talking about how the copyright can be managed in a way that maximum revenue can be generated, research can be facilitated, whereas any kind of commercial use can be stopped if done without authorization. How the author's rights and the owners' rights can be established, and how technology itself can be used to enforce the copyright. So these are some of the agendas. So all of these platforms, whether JSTOR or Manupatra or Westlaw or any platform, CaseMine, anything you are using, these all businesses who do business on e-resources are actually employing digital rights management. And while these digital rights management tools may help us as researcher to carry out our research, we also have to ensure that we are not violating any kind of access control protocol which has been implemented by that particular app or platform or website. And we also, if it is not a legal violation, at least it should not be an ethical violation also. So I'll come to these issues one by one. For now, I was just introducing to you the concept of copyright and the problems which can arise. Let's talk about licensing. When we talk about license, what is a license? A license is nothing but a permission. So, for example, when you go to a restaurant, you are told that there is parking available and you park your car. So that means that there is a license given to you to park your car. Of course, that does not mean that you can keep your car forever there. For a limited period where you're visiting the restaurant, you have the permission. Similarly, when we talk about licensing in digital sphere, the license means it's a permission to use the copyrighted work. Okay. Now, of course, since it's a permission, that means there can be certain conditions also imposed on you. These conditions can be for how long you can use it, how can you use it, is it for commercial purpose you can use, for non-commercial purpose you can use. If you are using it and generating your own work, so for example, if I'm referring to 10 different authors of books, articles, newspapers, and I'm referring to their work and using the same for my research, then what my research paper, what should be the restrictions on my research paper, that can also be determined by the license in the original papers which I am referring to, particularly for digital space. So this is all how licensing works. Now, thereby, the key essential elements of a license are what? First, the user rights. So permission to do what? I gave you an example. There are platforms which says that you have a permission to read our content, but you do not have a permission to copy our content. You cannot do CCP, right? So that means there is a restriction put on the user, right? You can scroll through, read as many number of times for free perhaps, or there can be other restrictions like you can only access beyond the abstract when you pay for it, but what we call to be beyond the paywall articles, right? Similarly, there are terms of uses, renewal, and termination. So, for example, if I have access to a particular article, you'll find out, particularly for Routledge and other publishers, they say that you can access the article, but you have to pay, and this will be for, let's say, for next 1 year you have access, or next 24 hours you have free access. Thereafter, you have to pay. So these are all grounds of renewal and termination. Similarly, some digital platforms also mention or they maintain uses analytics. So, which article, how many number of time? You will find out in journals, if there are 10 articles published, they show that this abstract has been viewed 10 times, this abstract has been downloaded, which means that it shows the uses analytics per se. Sometimes what happens, if a particular article is most frequently visited or most frequently quoted per se, that also has implications that these high cited articles are good quality. It can be that they are fake citations, paid citations, but generally they imply that these are good quality articles per se. So these data users analytics are also important. Similarly, when we talk about licensing, particularly for research purpose, 4 licenses are important or are relevant. One, subscription license. So every institution will have certain kind of subscriptions. For example, I have listed here Yen Online, JSTOR. So yearly or every 2 years, you renew such subscription. Then there are institutional licenses. So if you are a public university, you will have free access, or if you're a research university, you will have free access, right? So there are access to materials or tools also. For example, for universities, they give free plagiarism software. This is provided by the UGC, right? So that is a institutional license per se. Then there are licensing models which are like open access based or Creative Commons based, which means that you can freely access it. But that doesn't mean, just because it's free doesn't mean there is no copyright. There is a copyright, and we are determining how the terms of uses will be done. So you can freely access it, but you cannot download it. Or you can freely access it, but if you're using the content, you have to cite it, give attribution. Or you can use the content, but only for non-commercial purpose. Or if you use the content, you will use it only subject to the fact that your own research will also be based on the same licensing. So everyone else can freely use your research. So these are some models. So primarily based on what? Free use of the data or material, but with attribution. Attribution remains key to any kind of open access models per se. Last is software licenses. So there are proprietary softwares like JPL, MIT. Now they say that, okay, if you make any modifications, then you have to attribute us. If you give thereafter your software, which you have developed from ours, then such software should be subject to the same conditions. All these are actually proprietary licenses thereby. So these four become the core discussion. Now, for academicians or research scholars like you and me, the movement which is crucial is the open access movement and open access educational resources. We all want to refer to quality works. We want to have access to reading materials, reference materials, or provide it during our lecture to our students and others. Thereby, the open access movement makes what? It makes content freely available for scholarly purposes. Okay. Now, there are actually two models. One is the green open access and the second is the gold open access. The diamond open access is actually a type of the gold open access itself. So what is the green? First, let me explain what is closed access. This black line which you see here in the photo is a closed open access, which means that closed access, not open access, closed access. Closed access means that it is beyond the paywall. It is not accessible. You pay royalty, thereby you access. Whereas open access, particularly the green open access, means that here the scholar or the researcher or the teacher, faculty, whatever name you use it, they themselves are self-archiving their content work in repositories. So for example, I myself is putting my work, if a article, if a content I've written in ResearchGate. I have a profile in ResearchGate and I'm uploading it there. This is called green open access. So of course, I'm not asking you if you read my articles, if you go and search my profile in ResearchGate and read my articles, I'm not asking you for any payment. I'm self-archiving so that you can refer to, read my work, give comments or reviews on it. The second one is the gold open access. Here, what happens if for publishers particularly, you'll find out that if you want to publish with good publishers, they will say that, do you want to publish as proprietary material or in open access network? If you say proprietary, let's say अगर हम Oxford University Press ही ले ले, so if I say proprietary material, that means you have the user of the material has to pay for it. My article, if they want to read, they have to pay for it. But if I choose gold open access, then what Oxford University Press will do is that they will charge me for publication in the gold open access. They will say some kind of processing fee has to be given. And this will enable that anyone can access for free, because publishers also have to generate revenue, right? Why else are they publishing the work? So they will say, instead of putting the burden on the user of the content, the accessor of the content, we are charging a minimal amount from you, the author who wants to publish with us. Now, what is diamond? So in diamond, which is a subtype, generally it is financed. So I told you now that if I am highly cited, Oxford will say that, okay, fine, you have reached 10 million views. Since you are so highly read, we are keeping it in diamond. Now people can for free access it, right?
Ma'am,
So
sorry
these
for
are
the
some of the,
interruption, ma'am.
yes.
I think your slides aren't moving. Uh,
No, I'm on this slide only.
okay, okay. So sorry, so sorry. We thought that your slides aren't
You
moving.
can
We
see
are
the paths to open access, right?
no, ma'am. We are on DB Moda case.
Okay. Is it?
Yes, ma'am. That's why we thought that actually when you refer to a point that it is visible on screen, so then I realized that maybe you are on the other screen, we are on the other slide.
Can you see now?
Yes, ma'am.
Because I
Now
don't know
it
how
is
to
visible.
change now.
Yes, ma'am. Now it is visible.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, how do I go to the next slide
Ma'am,
from
once
here?
change the slide.
It's not giving the option now. Can you see the change in slide
Yes,
now?
ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Now we can see the change.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
so after DB Modak, I came to this one for reference of the audience. This is the digital rights management that I've talked about. Then this is the licensing in digital sphere where I talked about the subscription licenses, institutional licenses, open access, and software. Okay, so the examples thereby. And now we are on this one. Everyone can see?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. It's
Okay.
visible now.
So I'll not go in full screen mode because then I think it's not moving. I'll be in this mode only.
No, ma'am.
So
This
I
is
was
fine.
giving,
This is fine.
it's fine. Okay, fine. So in this, you see three ones I've mentioned: green open access, gold open access, and diamond open access. And I've shown you also, right? Now, thereby, the open access model does what? It enhances the visibility. It helps in collaboration because if I am publishing in ResearchGate and in Green Research, so maybe the paid version, the published version is by OUP and they are charging money for it, but my pre-print version, before they have edited and published, the rough work which I've done, the Word file, if I published it in ResearchGate, then anyone can read that one, right? I have rights over the version which is with me. It is only the copy edited version that a publisher has rights for. So thereby it enhances my visibility. It helps me in collaborating. So anyone, more number of researchers reading my work, they may be referring to my work. They might be interested in doing a research project with me, and thereby global access is also achieved. Some of the examples are what? So you'll find out that UGC has now mandated all research theses should be published in the Shodh Ganga. Then there is that National Digital Library of India also, where there are a lot of materials available for open access. Then there is EPG Pathshala, where there are different courses like on contract, on criminal law, on intellectual property. You'll find out there are courses which you can do, and there are materials also like reading materials which are provided per se. All of these are examples of open access mixed models per se. Okay. See, here is the example. So the researcher, the scientist who is conducting the research, he sends his article for publication to the publisher. Publisher will do what? Publisher will send it to the other scientist for reviewing, right? And after reviewing, which can be with general acceptance or with some revisions or something, it is published. This is what happens in publishing, right? All of us are researchers, so we send to different journals, and the journal says that certain revisions are needed or it is accepted per se. Now, what happens is that after it is published, also the draft which they will publish how according to their editing. Okay, so maybe I wrote it for 16 pages, but their font size is so small that it is coming to 10 page only, or the paragraph number, or they do other kind of highlighting or editing per se. Apart from these copy edited version, my original work, the Word file which I have, that I can self archive by posting it to a repository. This is the open access model. Now, my Word file becomes available publicly for anyone to read. The publisher may be saying that to access the article through our website you have to pay, but you will often find, particularly foreign famous researchers or academicians, they publish it their works. They say that open access mein karenge hum, and they publish it in different platforms like Academia or ResearchGate or any other such platforms per se. The other model which is relevant is, Ashna, please confirm whether you can see the slide on Creative Commons.
Yes, ma'am. We are able to see.
Okay. So yeah, so Creative Commons licenses is another thing which is very important. Now, Creative Commons is a part of copyleft movement. What is copyleft? So copyright is a term. A wordplay on it is copyleft movement. Here we say what? We are not saying there is no copyright, but we are actually manipulating the terms of the copyright. We are saying for free access it, but now that you have accessed my work, your work should also be accessible on the same condition. Or for free access my work, but you have to cite me if you're using my work. Or you can access my work for free only if your access is for a non-commercial purpose. Okay, so all these are different examples of Creative Commons licenses. So for example, when you say CC, CC stands for Creative Commons, and BY, BY stands for attribution. So there are models which runs on CC BY. For example, there are open education resources itself, like Biomade, जहाँ पे different articles are there. You can refer to the different articles. But if you are using any data from the article, you have to attribute citation basically, right? So this is attribution is required. Then there are contents which are there as CC BY SA. SA stands for share alike. So for example, if you are taking a material from Wikipedia, you are under CC BY SA license, which means that your content where you have used the Wikipedia material should be also under CC BY SA license. So the further work which is generated has to be under the same license, right? Then there is CC-BY-NC, which is non-commercial. So, for example, all the articles posted on ResearchGate, Academia Edu, and many other university repositories also, like NLS repository, any other repository, right? All these are under CC BY NC, meaning that you can use the content but only for non-commercial purposes, and whenever you use it, you will cite it, give that the source was this particular repository. So thereby, when I am publishing with Oxford my article, and I'm also uploading a copy in ResearchGate, my objective is not to derive money from ResearchGate, but only to provide access so that you read my book. So it is for non-commercial purposes. I want many people to read my work, understand why I conducted, what is the relevance of my research per se, right? So these are CC BY NC licenses. And the last one is CCO, which is public domain dedicated, which means any data here is fully open. You are not surrendering your copyright, but you will not exercise your rights under copyright. You are declaring that copyright to hai, and for the next 60 years I have the copyright, but I will never enforce my rights. So for example, all the data available in NASA, there is European Open Data Portal, in India also there is Open Data Portal. All these are per se under public domain dedicated portals per se. Okay, so I've made a comparison also. So the fair dealing provision which we have in India in section 51, that is a classic example of CC-BY-NC. So as a teacher, I can use material from other sources. For example, you see, here I have mentioned the source. That means I've taken this image for someone, some other site, but I've also mentioned what is the site. I am attributing back to the site that this is the information, and I am using it for a non-commercial purpose, that is course of instruction per se, right? Now next, apart from this, statutorily, under the Indian Copyright Act, there are three different kinds of licenses. One is an implied license, which is the fair dealing. So anything under section 52 of the Copyright Act, all the acts which are mentioned under section 52 amounts to fair dealing. And then there are two other kinds of licenses which are called statutory licenses and compulsory licenses. Okay. So for example, for the purpose of research and education, which are important, let's refer to some orphan works. What are orphan works? So for example, I have written a dissertation, let's imagine, and the first page where my name and details are mentioned, my roll number, where am I from, my name, all that has somehow, the physical copy somehow has lost the cover. and I am not identifiable now. If as an author I am not identifiable, in such cases it will be an orphan work, and who is the owner of the copyright is also not acceptable. Now, but however, my thesis is a very good work, and my university wants many people to read the research I've done. So in such cases, section 31A allows for digitalization for the purpose of research archives. So the university can digitalize such works, orphan works, and make it available through their own websites so that people can. Now, if tomorrow I only can find out my research and I can say that, oh, that was my work, and I can satisfy that that was my work, then the university will have to attribute it back. And now if I'm dead, of course, then no one is able to identify who it is. Still, the public is having access to my work through the portal because of the digitalization of the research archives. The second relevant provision is statutory license under section 31D. Now, how is it relevant for any kind of educational? This talks about broadcasting particularly, but we are talking from the angle of education. So educational broadcasting also. If, let's say, the original work, the owner of the copyright is not broadcasting or providing access, withholding access to the work, in such cases, a license can be asked for statutory license under section 31D, whereby if the government is satisfied, they will say that you pay this much licensing fee, will deposit it in the in the account which is there, and you can make broadcasting of the content. So for example, AIR, Doordarshan, they often broadcast the works of prominent scholars through radio waves or through the national TV channel, which can be for educational purposes, right? Similarly, section 31 talks about compulsory licenses. Particularly, we can interpret it for textbook reproduction. So if we cannot access books because of the high prices, as students, we cannot find the book, the prints to be very highly, the prices to be very high per se, or not fairly priced, or there are not adequate number of copies available, then a license can be asked under section 31 per se. Apart from that, under fair dealing, the relevant provisions are section 52, 1A and 1N. 1A is for the purpose of quoting. So I want to quote someone, I want to quote Amartya Sen for an article. I take an excerpt from his article and I'm putting that. I have to cite it. It is by Amartya Sen, not by me, right? I cannot just CP and put it in my article. So quoting, taking short extracts for the purpose of education, digitalization, for preservation, this is allowed. And under N, what is allowed? Let's say there is a library, my university library or your university library, where you have a physical copy, but the physical copy is worn and torn, and the university wants to, the university, or if the library is a non-commercial library, then the non-commercial library wants to maintain a digital copy because the physical copy is subject to warranty. So such digitalization for the purpose of preservation of the copy is allowed if a non-digital copy is already available with the library. Then section 52 clause 1H, which talks about particularly for access for educational uses. So for the course of instruction, even for online teaching or online publication of material for the purpose of teaching, certain limited extracts can be published and compiled and published. So for e-learning platforms also, for the purpose of education, research, they can make compilations provided that they are smaller excerpts and they satisfy the test of fair use. That is, they will not have the potential of replicating the whole of the work or replacing the value of the original work, where people no more refer to the original work. The next issue which is there is on digital piracy. What do I mean by piracy? Piracy means that any kind of unauthorized reproduction, distribution, or sharing. So many a time you have heard about the Science Hub controversy and how in telegrams, PDFs are available or illegal repositories being made. So someone is having copies of all books, digital copies, unauthorized reproductions of all books in their Google Drives. That will be an illegal repository, right? Now, I told you that for education or research purpose, you can have access, but if you're having the whole of the book or whole of the material, without any kind of license, then it will amount to digital piracy. I've given a book example also. A scanned copy of a textbook to Google Drive and sharing it publicly or even with limited people will be an example of piracy, even if it is for educational use, right? The next point is on plagiarism versus copyright infringement. What is plagiarism? Plagiarism is any kind of unauthorized use, okay? Or any imitation also of someone else's use without proper acknowledgement. Now, plagiarism per se is not equivalent to copyright infringement, because sometimes what happens in copyright, the test of originality is very low, okay? So sometimes even if you do some editing in the concept, then in the paragraphs or the lines per se, then it will be having a fresh copyright. But you stole someone's idea, right? It is not your idea. So plagiarism is more of an ethical wrong than a legal wrong. And the UGC Promotion of Academic Integrity and Prevention of Plagiarism Regulation of 2018, it mandates that similarity checks should happen and penalties should be imposed, both on professionals and students when there is plagiarism happening. So we can say that plagiarism is thereby a academic misconduct and not necessary, depends on how much you're plagiarism. अगर तुमने पूरा आर्टिकल ही किसी और का या बुक ही किसी और का या चैप्टर ही पूरा किसी और का उठा के अपना क्लेम कर रहे हो, मे बी कॉपीराइट इन्फ्रिंजमेंट भी हो जाएगा बिकॉज ऑन सब्सटैंशियल सिमिलैरिटी. बट इफ यू आर taking paragraphs, one paragraph, two paragraph, 30 words, 40 words, that may be plagiarism, or you are paraphrasing but claiming this idea to be yours, which is actually some other person's. That amounts to actually plagiarism. So when we talk about plagiarism, these are the types. So complete plagiarism means that you have taken whole of the work of other. Mosaic is where you are taking portions. So maybe a 1,000-page book is there and you are taking from different chapters portion of the work and making your own 10-page project. That is a mosaic plagiarism. Accidental plagiarism, where you fail to say that, you forgot to cite that this is not my idea, this was Einstein's idea actually. You're claiming Einstein's formula to be yours. That will be accidental. Direct plagiarism, where you directly copy paste and you do not cite. Self plagiarism, this is there in the UGC regulation also. Self plagiarism means that you are actually taking your own work, your own previous work. Let's say I published an article in 2015. I'm using portions of that article in 2025 without citing that it was a part of the previous article. This is self plagiarism. Source based is what? Sometimes people do what? They take others' articles, books, resources, and they take the citation from the others' work. So the citation is actually not original, but copied from some other work. That is called source-based citation. And paraphrasing, which many of us does, we use AI-based technologies to paraphrase, right? So paraphrasing is also a plagiarism. It is not a copyright infringement, but it is a plagiarism because those ideas or those expressions are not ours. They are actually paraphrased to avoid copyright infringement or to avoid plagiarism detector softwares per se. So this is also an issue for legal researchers. Lastly, another contemporary issue which is happening currently, which can be a lecture in itself, thereby I've just put a minimum content is that you can look into it, is copyright and artificial intelligence. So AI is being used. For example, paraphrasing tools are being used, or AI is being used. I can give a command to ChatGPT that make PPT for me, or article for me, or a lecture for me. So all these brings two questions. Who owns copyright over the AI generated work? Is it the developer of the AI? Is it me who is giving prompt, or the AI itself? Second is the AI has also been trained using some copyrighted material. So what about that? Okay, so I'll explain both these questions. For example, if I'm feeding all these raw data that I've collected through Google Form, I'm giving this data to AI and saying that predict for me a particular data set is positive, hypothesis is being proved or not. So it's not me who is proving, it is the AI who is proving, or it is for example, there are softwares like Mendeley, which can generate citation. You can say that Blue Book citation chahiye, to Blue Book citation bana denge. So all these AI based tools are they actually infringement of copyright or are they facilitators of enforcement of copyright? This is question number one. Second is, for example, if you are using ResearchGate, there is a modern controversy happening that whenever you are wanting to upload your paper to ResearchGate, the contract which is there, it says that we'll use your paper, your content to train our AI. So, and that contract which you tick yes or agree, tick, that is actually a click wrap contract. So you cannot say that no, I am not agreeing. If you want to upload the content, you have to click yes. So all these raises questions of data licensing and fair deal. That whether my consent is valid, whether if I give my consent, whether my copyright is transferred to the platform and the AI, what is happening, right? How royalties will be paid to me? All these are questions. And also there are some platforms like JSTOR, SSC Online, which does not allow for actually data scraping. That means that AI tools cannot be used to find out what is the data. They have put TDM measures, technological barriers, so that data scraping cannot happen. So if someone uses an AI to counter that TDM, is it a violation of copyright or not? These are also questions which are relevant, but this itself can be one lecture, so we will be not going into details of it. Now I've raised all the licensing issues per se. If anyone has any question, anything else they want to raise, you can tell me now. Ashna, is there any question? Am I audible? Hello? Hello? Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you are audible.
Okay. Yes. So any feedback, any comments, anything, anyone has any question? Okay, someone has put a question on provide information on voice, copyright over voice. Currently, copyright over voice is not done in India, but the controversy is regarding whether AIs can be used for doing deepfake, because AI technology is being used for creating deepfakes, like images or voice can be replicated without my permission. So those are more of violation of personality rights or celebrity rights per se. There's this musician in India have also got an injunction. I forgot, very popular musician. Recently, only he got an injunction in Delhi High Court. But those are not actually copyrightable issues. Those are actually enforcement of personality rights in India. Any other question anyone has?
Participant, any other participant having any question? Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Participants? So I will proceed with the vote of thanks. Before the vote of thanks, ma'am, I would like to thank you for the enlightening session and regarding enlightening us all about how the plagiarism is different from copyright infringement, because many a times there is a confusion regarding both of these concepts. Right? So there was researchers with whom are with us. They might be able to have a grasp and they might be able to understand now that what is the difference between the two concepts and how you should access the resources which are available online, how you should access the ethical use of the online databases which are available to us basically. So that was a very, very enriching session. I hope the participants must also have enjoyed. With this, we would like to conclude our this session.
And I'm sorry for that digital interruption in between
No, ma'am,
because
that's completely fine, ma'am. That's
because I
completely
think there was some Wi-Fi error in the
yes,
university,
ma'am.
maybe because of electricity going
Yes,
and
ma'am.
coming. I couldn't realize, but later I'm seeing that there are messages. I'm sorry for that.
No
I
problem.
hope the PPT was visible all
Yes,
through.
ma'am. PPT was later on visible. You know, these are certain shortcomings also. These are certain boons as well for of online communication. So, but that was a very enriching and enlightening session for us. I hope everybody enjoyed and everybody had certain important key takeaways which they could understand. Proceeding further, I would like to invite our Dr. Lalita Nitin Bhosle to please propose the vote of thanks. Please, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you are audible.
Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the organization, it is my privilege to propose the vote of thanks for today's insightful session. First and foremost, I extend our sincere appreciation to Dr. Devmita Mandal for taking the time to with us, for sharing her deep insight on copyrights and licensing in the digital context. Your presentation has enriched our understanding of the complex relationship between law, technology, and intellectual properties in the modern digital age. The clarity and the depth of your talk have truly inspired us to explore the subject in future, ma'am. I would like to thanks also to express my sincere appreciation to our institution leadership for their constant encouragement and support in the organizing such enlightening sessions. A special thanks to all the faculty members, coordinators, and technical team for their efforts in ensuring the smooth conducts for today's event. Lastly, I extend my gratitude towards the participants for their enthusiastic and enlightenment, engagement, and contribution towards making this session great success. Thank you once again, Dr. Devgita Mandan, for
Thank you
your
so much, ma'am.
valuable time and contribution. We hope to have the privilege to hosting you again in future, ma'am. Uh,
Sure, ma'am. Thank you so much for the invitation from your side. It is
thank you, ma'am.
great to meet online. Hopefully, I have contributed towards this workshop and people have enjoyed. Thank
Same
you
to
so
you, ma'am,
much.
indeed. Thank
Thank
you
you so
so
much,
much,
ma'am.
madam. Thank you. Uh, Participants, we shall be sharing the feedback from shortly over the WhatsApp group.